I want to welcome you to Dream Chasers Radio with me, your host, Yaya Diamond. What's up, peoples? How you doing? It is a great day, and I'm so very excited to be here. This is an author's edition right here, and I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment wherever you're watching. Comments are welcomed. We do have the links for all of our authors in the description box so that it'll be easy for you guys to find the books that we're talking about, as well as the authors, because they are very important. I mean, literally speaking, without an author, how would we know anything? Good question, right? We would all be idiots. Okay, me first. But we have an amazing author on the show today. Mr. Stephen Miller is here, and we're going to be talking to him today about his book and pantyhose. Go figure. All right, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So tell us about yourself a little bit.
Well, I'm from Northern California, from the San Francisco Bay Area, where I spent most of my life. And I went to high school there and to college when I was living there. And there's not a whole lot to tell. It was a very ordinary life that I did. But that is where I started writing
Mm.
in Northern California. I started writing actually as a teenager during an English class. I did very poorly in school. I
Mm.
was a terrible student, much to the dismay of my mother and father. And the one class I did well in was English grammar, and English composition. So I wrote a lot just because I felt confident in that area. And then one thing led to another. I flunked out of college when I was 20 years old, and I got a job at a newspaper in Sacramento, California. And that is when I had my first news stories published, and I wrote for newspapers for many years after that.
Wow. A lot of people can relate to that, not liking school, not being good in school, but then pursuing a career that they never thought they would be able to pursue. When you started writing, though, how did that begin for you? Was it like short writing? Was it satisfactional to you?
When I was in high school in the English composition class, I wrote compositions. They were short, but I got A's and B's in them. I'll never forget my teacher, Mr. Klein, telling me that he liked my writing, and that boosted my confidence greatly. And then when I flunked out of college at the age of 20, I went to work for a newspaper, and the city editor, whose name was Mr. Harvey, asked me one day if I would cover a story, which shocked me, but I said, yes, of course, I'll do that. So I went out and I covered a story, and then I covered another story, and then another story. And that built up his confidence in me, my response to his request. And it's been kind of a long road, you might say, but one that has been very satisfying to me.
That is so cool. I can just see the whole development of your profession and skill. That is just wonderful. So you have a book that's coming out and it says here, and I just, it kind of threw me for a loop. Does God love my pantyhose?
Yes.
Tell me about this. And you got to tell me about the name. Okay. First, just tell me.
The name was one of the last parts. So let me back up on this.
Okay.
This Most of this story was written more than 25 years ago. I was dating a young lady, and she had a roommate who was a man who was a teacher at a local college. And he was going through what they call now a gender reassignment, but it's a sex change.
Mhm.
And I never met her roommate, but I talked to him on the phone. And then a few weeks later, I was sitting in the public library, and I thought to myself, how unusual it would be to have a friend or a relative or a roommate or a coworker who is going through this sex change, who starts his life as a man or starts his job as a man, and within 4 or 5 or 6 months he kind of morphs into a female, and that does happen.
Yeah.
it happens today. It's more common probably than we know. And so that is the genesis of this story. That's how it came about. And the story is about the conflict in his life. Everywhere he turns, there's conflict, whether it's his job, his marriage, his neighborhood, his church. He just can't seem to escape it. Even when he takes a short vacation, he runs into conflict while he's on vacation. And so that is how this whole thing came about.
Mm. Wow. So
Now,
the pantyhose, tell me about that.
well, he begins wearing women's clothes. That's part of this process. And there's a discussion between my main character and his wife. And it's about halfway or two-thirds of the way through the story. And he confesses to her that he has been wearing women's clothes. And so she wonders, and what about, he tells her he's been wearing pantyhose. Now, this is a religious person as well. And so he begins to wonder and question, does God still love me? What
Yeah.
does God think about this process? So that's how the title came about. Does God still love me? And does he love the clothes I'm wearing? Does he love my pantyhose?
Wow. That is a big deal. In the book, what kind of topics do you discuss?
We discuss a personal decision, number one. I did more research on this than I ever planned on doing in my life, just because once I became interested, I couldn't stop pursuing it. And so I have to back up a little bit here. I was sitting in a library. I've already told you that. I was sitting there for several Sunday afternoons in a row, reading up on it. Now, 25 or 27 years ago, when most of this story was written, things were a lot different in this country. The laws were different, the attitudes were different. And anybody who has experienced this himself or herself will tell you this. We come full circle on people's attitudes, but it was a process which he went through, and he didn't know what to do about some of the situations in his life, like his marriage, for example, was falling apart all around him. His job, his supervisor at the college where he was working, wondered, well, do we want to have this female, soon to be female, on our staff? The neighbors were wondering, and he was questioning his own religious beliefs, which were deep beliefs at that time.
Wow. Wow. That is a big change for anyone to make.
Wow is right. That's exactly.
Yeah. That's a big change for
Oh,
anyone
it's
to make.
enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of hesitance, I would say. I don't think anyone deliberately wants to do that. It's not something that someone was like will be like, oh yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and change my, whole gender. I mean, it doesn't happen that way. It happens gradually because it is a big thing and it's a huge thing. And to write about it, how does that make you feel?
Well, it opened my eyes a lot. I'm a religious person also.
Hmm.
And believe me, there have been times in my life when I questioned uh, God's role in my life. My mother and father raised me and my brothers in the church. But, I left the church for a while. And so to answer your question directly, doing the research was an eye-opening experience for me, and it still is, because there are men and women in our society now, in this area where I live and probably where you live as well, who are going through this process, and they run into conflict every day. And so the way I feel is that God does love all of us. He may not love our habits, he may not love our attitudes, but he does love us. And I think it's important to emphasize that. And so, in that sense, this this story speaks to a very wide audience. It speaks to them, and I hope it reassures them that the big guy upstairs is looking after them.
Right. You know, it's like you were supposed to do this, this is in your blood, and yet you ignore it. How is life supposed to be happy if you can't be who you're supposed to be?
That's a huge question. And I know that there are millions of people, not just in this country, but around the globe, who deal with this. I know that there are people in other parts of the world who face the same conflicts that we face here when it comes to dealing with feelings like you just mentioned. I'm supposed to be somebody else. So what do I do? What do I tell my family? What do I tell my friends? What do I tell my coworkers? And there's conflict, constant conflict. And it's got to be very difficult.
Yes. The biggest question I have for you is how did it change your belief?
I think I'm just, my religious beliefs have not changed, but I think they've deepened. I think that I just, I try to understand people more. I used to be kind of narrow minded and conservative, and I still am. My core beliefs have not changed,
Hmm.
but I think you can be kind of conservative on the one hand, but on the other hand, open your eyes and open your heart because it begins in the heart, I think, to try to understand people and how it is that this comes about. That's what my experience has been for me.
Yeah. People have the right and they have the choice to live the way they want to. I don't believe that we as other people have that right to impose what we believe and onto the other person because the other person would then have no choice but to either reject you or accept you. Kind of a hard situation to put yourself in as a person who wants the best for the other person. So you do have to kind of allow them to, go out and live their lives and be who they believe they should be. And your love for them should be always unconditional. At least that's what I think.
Well, you're right. I mean, we're talking about religion here. You think about Jesus.
Hmm.
His love was unconditional,
Yeah.
and his approach to people was one of love. Not that he didn't correct them; he did. He tried to. Sometimes they uh, accepted the correction, and sometimes they didn't.
Yeah. Hmm.
It would be a very, very difficult situation to be in. But society has changed so much in the last 25 or 30 years. When I first began researching this topic and when I wrote the core of this story, it was not legal to have this kind of a sex change in America.
Hmm.
It wasn't. You had to go to Canada or some other country to have that surgery. We have changed. I think we've evolved a little bit. Some would argue that we have not evolved, or that we're going backwards.
I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it?
It is. How do I say this? I have to be careful how I phrase this. It is in the eye of the beholder. It's in the heart of the beholder. You can love a person and not love their habits and not love their behavior. And I think that's very important to make that distinction.
Yeah.
It is. We talked about this one time in a church that I attended a few years ago. How would the church, most of the members who were conservative, how would they feel about having a person with a sex change entering the church? What would be their approach? What would be their response?
How would they know?
You can tell very often, not always, but you can tell just by voice, by dress, by their mannerisms. Yeah,
Wow.
you can't always tell because a man that wants to look like a woman and live like a woman is going to make every effort to look like a woman. And there's various changes in
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I love your book, and I love the fact that you have changed. I also know, that it is irreversible. These things that they go through to actually have this to transgender themselves, to go through this entire process, the entire operation, from what I understand, is not reversible. And so going through that, understanding that that is the way they have to live, even with regret. Some people say they do regret it. Um, we still have to love them, and
That's true.
we have to accept the mistake that they may think that they have made, because all of us make mistakes.
We
And
sure do. And
yeah, I love this.
well, I do too. I agree with you. And as I said a moment ago, I think this book speaks to a very wide audience.
Yeah, it does.
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah. It does. I think it, and I love the title now that I understand it. Does God love my pantyhose? I heard a statistic, and I'm not really sure if you know the statistics of the people who have stated that they have regretted going through the operation for changing their gender. I heard it was really high. I'm not going to give the percentage because I don't know it, and I don't want to go by hearsay too much and be specific about hearsay. But I heard it was really high. As we go through life, we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And, the Father will forgive us. How come we can't forgive each other?
We could talk for hours about forgiveness also.
Yeah,
Why can't we forgive people?
exactly. Well, I think that your book is going to go through that and give people understanding, to give them the knowledge to forgive and also to accept and love.
Understand? Yeah. Well, I hope so. We'll see. Let's see
Yeah,
what
we'll see.
happens.
But you were going to say something?
Are you still with me on air?
Yeah, yeah. You were going to say something?
I hope that this book does have a positive impact on society, not just in this country, but in other parts of the world too.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. The last thing we need is more division, more
We don't need
strife.
that.
We don't. That's
No,
true.
we have enough of that. We actually need to squash all that. All that needs to be squashed. All of that needs to be thrown out the door with the baby diaper. It just needs to go. Definitely needs to go. Definitely.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your studies. I appreciate you tackling this topic. It's not one that's tackled a lot at all. I think we need to tackle a few more things that people don't tackle.
Well, we'll see. And
Yeah.
I appreciate your comments very much.
No, well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate yours. I appreciate your book. We're going to have the information for the book, as well as you have other books as well, right, Mr. Miller?
I do.
Wow. Well, so we're going to go ahead and get those links to the other books as well, and give you a general link so you guys can actually find Mr. Miller. And Does God Love My Pantyhose is going to be up for sale soon, I hear.
Yes. Probably
Okay.
not early enough for the Christmas shopping, but shortly thereafter.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Miller, for being on the show. I appreciate it so very much. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Don't forget to dare to be different. And until next time, guys, I hope God does love your pantyhose. Bye.